Well, hi everybody. This is
I'm Carol.
and I'm Andy. And what's our last names?
Our last names are Greenberg.
Greenberg. Hey, I've got
We should be wearing green,
and we should be okay.
but we're not.
So I have we're in blue. We didn't even coordinate again to prove that these are not rehearsed. All right, let me ask you a question if I can. Why don't they serve borscht on cruise lines?
I have no idea, but I would imagine that most people don't like borscht.
Really? Way back when, as a matter of fact, we honeymooned there was a place called the Borcht Belt. And this is going to become very familiar to many of us who were in the New York, New Jersey area. And if you were not in the New York, New Jersey area, you're going to learn something in addition to cruising, which we're going to cover, that you never knew before. So let's go start with a little bit of a background as to what the Borsch Belt was, what you did there, and then see what relationship there is between the Borsch Belt and cruising.
I'd like to know.
All right, so
never have made the connection.
have you
what the connection is.
have you ever been to the Borsch Belt?
Yes, I have.
And who did you go there with?
I went there with him
And others.
and others. And others.
So we'll talk about that. I'm going to reveal a little story to you a little bit later. You'll enjoy that. Of course, she was part of it, so she knows it. So the Borsch Belt was actually a vacation spot that began in the 1920s through the 1960s. And basically, it was exclusive for Jews.
And you know what? Now that you're making me think, I went to the Borsch Belt long before I went with you and others.
Really? Tell me about it, but hold your thought because I just want to lead up to that. So why did they form the Borsch Belt? What do you think?
They needed a place to get away from the city.
Why did they need a place to get away from the city?
The city made them crazy.
No, because nobody else would have them in their country clubs.
Oh.
You see, the Jewish people, believe it or not, were discriminated against. And as a result of that, they had no place to go. So what did they do? They formed their own area with places to go. And that worked out so well for them. And as a matter of fact, you might remember where some of the names of the hotels that were there. And they were great hotels. And they all formed the Borsch Belt. So what is borscht, by the way?
Borscht is a concoction made from red beets that I think originated in Russia, and some people eat it with sour cream. I know my grandmother loved borscht. I don't quite have a taste for borscht, but that's another reason why I don't.
In all the years we've been together, have you ever made me borscht?
I have never made you borscht, but I have a reason for it. Because borscht is made with red beets, and I have a red beet story, but that's okay.
You have a red beet story? All right, go ahead. Share the red beet story.
Well, when I was younger, my sister went away to boarding school. Every Friday night when she came home, we had red beet for supper. No matter what else we had red beet. Well, you can understand my distaste for red beet, and therefore I wouldn't like borscht.
I do want to clear something up in case somebody is thinking different thoughts. Now, you said your sister went to boarding school.
My sister went to boarding school because my sister was hearing impaired. My sister was actually deaf. So she needed the training all week long. So that's what they did. They couldn't go back and forth every day. They had to be away at school all week so they could have the training that they needed.
All right. So let's see if we remember some of the names of the Borsch Belt. There were Brinkmans, there was Browns, there was the Concord, there were Grossingers, there were Granites, there were the Hayden Hotel. You might not have heard of some of these. There was Irvington, there was Kushner's Hotel and Country Club, the Friar Tuck Inn, Laurel's Country Club, the Pines Resort, the Raleigh, the Overlook, the Tamarack Lodge, Stevenson, and the Windsor.
Wow.
And here are the ones that I went to. Did they mention the Nevele? I didn't even hear that.
I didn't hear
that. I went to the Nevele. And by the way, do you know what a Nevele means?
11.
Spelled?
Backwards.
Yeah, the 11 spelled backwards. I went there with my parents. We also went to the Raleigh. I remember that. And I do remember that we went to kosher hotels. And not every hotel was kosher, by the way, but many of them were. So you said you went to some hotels before me.
Well, actually, I didn't actually go to the hotels. I went in the surrounding area where my parents took a bungalow with a bunch of people in that area.
So let's reflect back for a moment on things we did when we went to the Borcht Belt. We went there, right? And all of a sudden, what happened? They took our luggage. They went ahead and dropped them off in our room. They had big swimming pools. They had recreational activities. Everything was structured. If you wanted to play cards, you could play cards. If you wanted to do this, and you got the calendar at the beginning of every day with all the activities. And if you wanted to do nothing but just sit around and schmooze, you could sit around and schmooze.
But wait,
Go ahead.
there was an unlisted activity that was very important every day. That was eating. You could eat and eat and eat, and you could order whatever you wanted, and they brought it to you.
So in other words, you went to the dining room for breakfast. I don't know if they had buffets. I don't remember that.
No, they did
You
not.
went to the dining room for breakfast. You went to the dining room for lunch. You went to the dining room for dinner. And what did they have in the evenings?
Entertainment. They had shows and bands and whatever.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I was younger, one of the hotels I stood at with my folks, I don't know if I ever told you this story. They had an 11 o'clock at night show. And what do you think the 11 o'clock at night show was all about?
Risque.
No, there was a stripper.
Oh, wow. It's those hotels?
Yeah, but she wore pasties. Oh, how do I know she wore pasties?
Because you saw her.
Oh my God, because I saw her, yes. Now, there's a little bit of a story that Carol and I want to tell, and that is before we got married, collectively with friends, we actually snuck away to, I believe it was the Nevele or the Raleigh, one of them.
No, it wasn't the Raleigh. It could be the Nevele.
The Nevele. We snuck away to the Nevele, and of course we were driving in those days, so I think I was 16 or 17. No adults were there. How we ever got the rooms, I still don't remember. Maybe somebody with us was over 18. I don't remember. But in any event, we had a blast, and we thought my parents and her parents never do it. Now, by the way, nothing went on. Okay, this was not like the movie Dirty Dancing. Okay, we didn't meet in the bunks. I don't want to get too personal, but nothing went on. I'm not even winking my eye because that's the emis. That's the truth, right? Okay, she was with me as well as others. But we had a great time anyway. We did skiing. I remember that. Anyway, so about we thought we got away with it. And then as a freshman in college, Carol, my wife, came down to visit me in North Miami Beach during the summer. My dad moved to Miami just for the summer. Can you figure that out? Oh, you might be wondering why. Do you remember why?
I remember why, but why didn't you tell them why?
You see, I was dating her since, you guys might know this, as a sophomore in high school. And well, to put it gently, my dad was not enamored with her. And he felt I was getting way too serious. And it didn't help either that I had a problem with my grades as a freshman because I focused more on her than I did my college degree and my college time. Anyway, he moved down. She came down. He didn't want anything to do with her, but I convinced him at the end of the season. Anyway, long story short, I'm making it too long. We sat around with my mom and Nipsey Russell. Remember Nipsey Russell?
Yes, he was a comedian.
He was a comedian. And I blurted out that Carol and I saw Nipsey Russell together. Why? Because Nipsey Russell was the entertainer when we snuck away several years earlier. And my mother turns and says, I know.
And we said, you do?
You do?
So she kept that secret for a long time.
And I asked her, how did you know? And she said, I hate to tell you this, but when you were dropping Carol off, who lived, by the way, across the street from me, I was walking home from work. I saw you packed her bag, you took her bags out of your car and you double parked and then you dropped her off and then you drove around. Then you came home and said, hi, I'm home. And I remember telling you, did you have a good time? Yeah, it was pretty good. I met some nice girls and guys, but she thought I went alone. Anyway, let's move on. That's our story of the Catskills. So how many of you were at the Catskills? How many of you want to go back to the Catskills now? Well, guess what? You can't.
You can?
You basically can't. Although they're starting to open up one hotel that I think you went to with your friends, but we're going to talk about that later. So basically you can't, except for the time that we were 20, we had our 25th wedding anniversary and we went back to the Concord Hotel. Why did we go back to the Concord Hotel?
That's where we honeymooned. So we thought, gee, this might be a good thing.
Yep, so we went there. So we went to the Concord Hotel, and about 2 years after that, they went bankrupt. But I have to share with you what happened on our honeymoon night. No details, no too much information. You want me to do this?
No, fine. Yeah, fine.
So the wedding was great. It was fantastic. We get to our room. It's a beautiful room. It's got a beautiful view. And it's our honeymoon night. I'm not going to go beyond that. So what did I want to do? I was in such a hurry to close the drapes that I yanked them from their structure, and the entire drape separated from the wall and fell down.
And guess what we had to do? We had to move to another
We had
room.
to change rooms. All right, let's get on with this thing. So now the Concord and most of the hotels are no longer, even after the movie Dirty Dancing. Remember that movie? So the question is why? What replaced them? Well, two things. In 1958, they began to have nonstop flights to Europe. And I'm going to kind of put this kind of politely. When you went to Europe nonstop, it cost a little bit of money. But there were only a select few citizens who were able to pay for those expensive tickets. The Jews were one of them. And of course, in 1958, because you were able to get to Europe, where else were you able to get to? Not nonstop, of course, yet Israel. So all of a sudden, they began to lose Jewish people leaving New York and going up to the Catskills, and they started going to Europe. In addition to that, cruising became a very big thing. In addition to that, cruising became a very big thing. And when it became a very big thing, that had the opportunity for people to leave and to go cruising. So what occurred in that time? That's where I want to talk to you about cruising. But I also want to mention, and I hate to go back, but there is something I forgot. When we were up in the Catskills and you were up in the Catskills, what was some of the acts that you saw? Sam Levinson, Jerry Lewis, Jackie Mason, Lou Mention, Jan Murray, Carl Reiner. Now, if I tell that to people today who in fact were young, not even born, what kind of a look?
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Exactly right. So let's go back and talk about, for a moment, the cruise lines. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you're going on this magnificent cruise. Oh boy, what a cruise you're going to go on. And you're going to end up on this ship, wow, the first scheduled transatlantic service in 1840. Did you know that?
What?
In 1840 was the first transatlantic service. And then that was done by the P&O Cruises, celebrating 175 years of heritage. Look at that boat. You'd love to step on that boat in the sailboat, right? You like sailing?
Yeah, but I'm not so sure about that cruise.
And then the Cunard Line in 1880 to 1890. You see that? 1880 to 1890. 5.2 million immigrants embarked on a life-changing journey.
To come to America.
Come to America. So the question is there still a Cunard line?
I think there is.
Yeah. Is there still a P&O line?
I'm not sure.
There is.
There is?
There is. So I want to give you a little bit of history about cruising, since I thought you might in fact be interested in it. So let's talk about it. So most of the older cruise lines, including the ones I just showed you, actually started off as shipping companies. They were shipping companies where they ship product from one to the other. And the very first one was known as the P&O, and that was called the Peninsula Steam Navigation Company. And in 1837, way back when, they were granted the government contract to take mail from Portsmouth as far away as Gibraltar. And from then, expansion grew, and by 1842, their ships were traveling as far as India, Hong Kong, and Australia. Also in 1840, I'd never realized that these cruise lines went that far back. Cunard was granted the contract to deliver mail across the Atlantic with their ship called the Britannia. And it made the first crossing from Liverpool to Halifax in how many days do you think?
Liverpool to Halifax?
And we've been to Halifax recently.
10 days.
Wow, you're right. Exactly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Exactly 10 days. And then in Norway in 1848, Fred Olsen also founded an international shipping company. And I did look something up. Fred Olsen shipping lines still exist to this day. I don't know. I don't know
Wow.
if you're aware of that. They still exist to this day. All right. So then over the years, believe it or not, there was another cruise line that started, and that was Holland America Lines. What year do you think Holland America started? Just take a
In
guess.
the very early 1900s.
Well, before 1871. In
1871.
1871, Holland American Line started off as a similar way as a steamship company. And then one of their first boats that took people from the Netherlands to America with 70 passengers was called the Rotterdam. And they still have a boat called the
I
Rotterdam.
thought so.
Yeah, but it's not the same boat.
I wouldn't imagine.
No, but I'm going to pause for a moment. So I started off by saying, what is the similarity between why don't they serve borscht
Yeah.
on cruise lines? Because when you go on a cruise, what do?
You eat.
Yes. What did you do in the Borscht Belt?
You ate.
Yes. And what else do you do?
You had entertainment. You
entertainment.
relaxed.
You
You had
relaxed.
entertainment. You did this, you that, everything. It wasn't scheduled for you, but it was available to you.
It was no, they have them all
Yeah,
scheduled.
right, but
Oh
I
yeah.
meant it wasn't scheduled for you personally. You could take advantage of the schedule.
Exactly right.
Right.
You could now also, if you guys remember being back in the Borscht Belt, didn't they have dance lessons? Oh yeah. Did you take any?
Can't remember. I probably did. I like to dance.
Right. You have to talk louder and come a little bit closer to them.
Yeah, I think I did. I like to dance, so
Yeah.
I probably did.
Yep, and we danced, and I went to dancing school too. By the way, how am I doing on my dancing? So we should not have continued with the dancing. All right, so let's continue. So the Holland American Line started bringing people over, and then in 1889 there was something called the Orient Line, and then they started moving forward. But here's the important thing: could the average person cruise, or did you have to be among the wealthy?
I would imagine you had to be among the wealthy.
Yeah, so that's why cruising in those days were not for the, if I may, non-wealthy individual. Okay, so Carol, I'm going to ask you for a moment to close the blinds because I think the sun is getting in, and so I'm going to excuse her for just a moment. All right, so then of course they had in the early 1900s, they began what? They began more cruises. And there was a cruise line called the White Star Line. And the White Star Line had 3 ships. One of them turned out to be one of the most famous cruise lines or cruise ships ever. And what cruise ship to this day is still the most popular cruise ship ever?
Carnival? Princess?
No, just the ship, not the line,
ship.
just the ship. The most popular one.
The Queen
No,
Mary.
I shouldn't say popular, pardon me. The most well-known one.
Queen Mary.
Nope.
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 What is it?
Titanic.
Oh, I was going to say that, but I mean, Titanic had a terrible ending, but I didn't want to say that.
That's why it's the most famous one.
Okay, but first you said the most popular one.
No, I
so
said famous. I can
right,
replay
but
the
then
tape.
you threw me
All
off.
right. And you had to get up. I get it. Okay.
Titanic.
So the Titanic, and by the way, that crashed in the year 1912. So what do you think happened to the cruise industry in 1912?
Down.
It began to go down because people were somewhat scared.
Now I'm curious and
Yeah.
how long it took the cruise line to recover.
It took them a while. Okay.
Like what's a while?
So the first half century saw some significant disruption to the cruise industry as a result of that, because nobody trusted it. However, World War I and World War II claimed a number of cruise ships in service to go ahead and have the Army. Fred Olsen alone, because he had a cruise line, remember, he lost 23 ships in the war.
But he let them use it.
He let them use it, yes.
Yes. Didn't pay him back for it?
No, I don't know about that. I mean, what are you going to do? You're in the war. You're going to ask for your money back?
No,
I mean,
no.
it's not any good. So between those devastating years, another cruise line formed. We actually went on that cruise line, and it was the very first cruise we took.
Oh, that was the Costa.
The Costa.
Cruise Line.
Yes, the Costa Cruise Line.
A European cruise.
And how did they grow? You know what? Do you like olive oil?
I love olive oil.
Yeah,
I use it all the time.
They were shipping olive oil to America. And in 1922, they had their first world cruise. And by 1948, they also offered cruises from Genoa to Rio de Janeiro. So we began to have a regrowth in cruising. Now, again, the prices were way too high. The average person couldn't do it. And that's why many of them, again, went up to the Concord and went up to the Jewish areas, as well as non-citizens. But you'll see in a moment how things have changed and why they changed. And then the 1950s came along. Remember the 1950s?
Yeah, I remember the 1950s.
Right? Father Knows Best. There was Purity. There was My Three Sons. There was my cousin Margie. My cousin Margie. The Ann Southern Show. Remember all the Lone Ranger? That was the time of just wholesome family, not the Lone Ranger. The time of wholesome family. And that's where the golden age of cruising began. And in 1950, the Cunard Lines held its very first all-American star cruise. And guess who was on the cruise? You won't believe this.
Who?
Noel Coward.
Okay.
Doesn't do anything for you.
All
Judy
right.
Garland. Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
Elizabeth Taylor.
On the same ship?
Yeah.
Okay.
Walt Disney. Rita Hayworth. They were all on board to entertain. And what do you think that did for the cruise lines? It really worked. And then things began to change again. They got better. They got better because the P&O was starting to take immigrants over to new destinations. And between 1947 and 1972, over 1 million people paid a fare of 10 pounds for passage to Australia. And by the way, do you know how many people cruise today?
Thousands, millions, hundreds of millions.
Well, not hundreds, but you'll have to wait to the end to find out. And they began. And then what happened? Some cruise lines came along and began to be formed. And these are the ones that are the legacy cruise, well, not the legacy, the new cruise lines. And here we go. Princess Cruise, Norwegian Cruise, Royal Caribbean, MSC, Carnival, Celebrity Cruises, Silver Sea, and a whole host of others. But here is where something really interesting occurs. Again, most industries, not all, have their roots by Jewish people. And modern day cruising is found to have its roots in Jewish legacy and Jewish lore. Now, why do I say that?
Why do you say that?
Did you ever hear of somebody called Ted Arison? Ted Arison was an Israeli. Ted Arison was born February 24th, 1924. And he was an Israeli businessman. And guess what he co-founded?
Well, it's got something to do with the cruise line.
Two of them that are still in existence today. Two of them. Norwegian Cruise Lines and Carnival Cruise Lines. And you know, Carnival has so many different brands, and all of them started that. And he, in fact, was the one that started it. And guess where he was born?
Well, you said he was from Israel.
I did, all right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I thought you said he was from Israel.
Israel. And he was born, I didn't remember. He was born to a wealthy businessman, and he was a third Romanian descendant. And then during the war, what war? The 1948 war, he was an officer in the IDF, and he was in the Arab-Israeli War, eventually achieving the rank of lieutenant colonel. And from 1946 to 1951, he managed the M. Dizengoff and Company, a shipping company. And guess what? That Dizengoff Company is still in existence today. But then he got the urge to be an entrepreneur. He wanted to be in business by himself. He didn't have any opportunity. So where did he move? He moved to the United States in 1952. And when he got to the United States, Guess where he moved? What city do you think he moved in the United States?
Miami.
Very good.
I figured that.
He
Miami.
He moved to Miami, where he founded the Norwegian Cruise Lines with a fellow by the name of Knut Klooster.
So I'm wondering, I don't know if you know this, I'm just wondering where the term Norwegian came from.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I do. In 1971, the partnership broke up.
Uh-oh.
And Arison by himself formed Carnival Cruise Lines. And when he did that, he did it with the help of Mushalin Rikilis, another Jew, in which he would make his fortune.
And fortune he did.
And of course, he owned the Miami Heat, and he gave money to the National Foundation for Advancement of the Arts. And he also established the Arison Foundation, where he gave money to Israel. But then something very interesting happened in 1986. Now, you might ask yourself after I tell you the story, did this happen by coincidence or did this happen by design? He had a condominium neighbor, a fellow by the name of Count D.S.G. El Kayam. He was vice president at E.F. Hutton. He was a neighbor, and the vice president of E.F. Hutton said, listen, Teddy, we got to talk. Teddy says, what? He says, look, I want you to right now go and put your Carnival Cruise Lines on the market, on the American Stock Exchange. And he did that 1 month before they had problems in the stock market. And when he put his cruise lines on, what happened? He raised a lot of money. Then the crash came. Yeah, the stocks went down, but he already had money. And none of his competition were able to raise money. And that's where he got the money to go ahead and expand the cruise lines. But then he had a problem, a bad problem, horrible.
What is it?
He made all this money. He didn't want to pay taxes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he didn't want to pay American taxes. So what do you think he did?
He swallowed the money away to Israel.
Not only did he squash the money away to Israel,
he went to Israel.
He went to Israel in an effort to avoid the estate tax in the United States. In 1990, Arison renounced his U.S. citizenship and his residence and returned to Israel, where he founded Arison Investments. And the Arison Investments then began to form a bank. What bank? You might have heard of it. Bank Hapolim. For more than what? Bank Hapolim. It's a very big Israeli bank. For more than $1 billion, the biggest private bank that was there at the time. Well, he eventually passed away on October 1st, 1999, and he was a chief executive officer for a long time. And that is basically the story of how cruise lines, there's more to come in this discussion, by the way, how cruise lines became as big as they are today.
So who owned Carnival today?
Carnival today is still owned by the same family. It's still owned by, yes, that's a good question. It's still owned by a Jewish family. And then now, of course, how big were the ships? Well, there was something else that Arison did that was absolutely brilliant. And I say how big were the ships? Because I want you to remember the TV show, The Love Boat. Remember The Love Boat?
I remember The Love Boat.
Was that a big boat?
No.
No. Arison was brilliant. He wanted people to cruise, but he didn't want to spend billions of dollars on cruising. So although he didn't develop the show, The Love Boat, he was in collaboration. And he said, you know what? We need a TV show about cruising. And his boat, one of the original Prince's boat, was the one that was used on the TV show. And when you get a chance to watch it, and it's usually on reruns, if you look at the insignia on top of the pool, it is so close to being the replica of the insignia that is used today on Princess Cruises. So what happened? People began to see the beauty of cruising. It was wonderful. It was fantastic. And then, of course, from there, they traced back the history to the growth of cruising. Now, again, in those days, they didn't have a lot of people that could be on a boat. Now, today, oh my gosh, do they have big boats. Wow. You know that there are boats today that are taller than Notre Dame. In China, by the way, they're building a replica of what boat that will be used for cruising. What boat do you think? Take a wild guess.
The Titanic.
Exactly right.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would you want to do that?
Because it's a replica, so they're taking a gamble.
Okay.
And they have ships today, you should know of it, that are huge. But they're also changing the way we cruise. I want you to go back, and here's where the similarities are. I want you to go back to the time that you and I went to the Concorde or to the Borcht Belt. What did we have to wear at dinner? Was dinner casual, or did you have to get dressed up?
You had to get dressed up.
Yep. And cruise lines dating back to the 1900s
Had to get
required
dressed up.
people to get dressed up.
Yeah. Dinner attire.
Dinner attire. And now, of course, what do we do with the dinner attire? A lot of, go ahead.
Yeah, it could be really casual.
Now ships are getting really casual, so you don't have to do that anymore.
Yes, because that's not what people want.
So let me ask you this question. When you were up in the Concorde, or I always say Concorde, when you were up in the Catskills, did you want to have 6,000 people around you?
Not really.
So in order to bring the cost of cruising down, what did people do? They built these magnificent, huge cruise lines.
To pack them in.
Packed them in. There's now a boat that's ready for sailing, Symphony of the Seas, that carries 6,000 people.
Oh, no, not for me.
Me neither. Neither. Me neither or either. So with that being said, cruise lines are getting smaller. I'm sorry, they're getting bigger and bigger, but the luxury cruise lines like Azamara, Oceana, Silver Sea, some of these boats only carry 300 people.
Of course, they have personalized catering teams.
Yep, and they get richer and richer. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, that the cruising is continuously changing, but yet it has its roots in the way things were done in the Borcht Belt. And if we go on and we take a look at all the advances that were done, some of this is actually going to surprise you. There are boats now, okay, that, like I said, with 6,000, that is more than the size of some cities, believe it or not, okay? There are boats that are 4,500 feet long and 250 stories tall. And there is a cruise line called Freedom Cruise Lines, and they claim that they will be able to carry, you ready for this? 10,000 overnight guests. And the price to build this ship, how much do you think the price to build this ship is?
$30 million.
$11 billion.
Oh my God, they have a lot of money to recover.
$11 billion. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
All right. Now let's take a look at something that which nobody will ever tell you.
What?
Here we go. So there's a boat called the Symphony of the Seas, as I mentioned, and they've got 6,000 passengers. Listen to this. During a 7-night cruise, people consume 6 million coffee beans, 60,000 eggs, 20,000 pounds of, what do you think?
Meat.
Potatoes.
15,000
pounds of beef, 12,600 pounds of flour. It gets better. 9,700 pounds of chicken. It's not going to be a Jewish cruise. 5,300 pounds of
lobster.
Bacon. 5,000 pounds of French fries. 2,000, and here maybe it's for the Jews.
What happened to the pizza?
I don't know. 2,500 pounds of salmon. 2,100 pounds of, now's your turn. Lobster tail. 2,000 pounds of wings. 7,000 pounds of ice cream. Wow. What do you think?
Yeah. Did they say anything about the alcohol?
Not in this report. And I did see a report once about how much alcohol is consumed, and it's a darn shame. It is unbelievable. It is crazy. All right. How are we doing so far?
We're learning about cruising.
Let's see this. So how many people in the world cruise today in one year in 2019? 2020, of course, is different. In 2019, give me a number.
40. 40 million.
It's 28 million.
28 million.
28 million people cruise. And watch this. This will be really interesting for you to know. In 2017, the Port of Miami had 5.6 million passengers, which is greater than the population of most cities in the world, including, of course, Barcelona and many others. And and the Port of Miami one time welcomed 52,000 passengers in one day. By the way, Florida is the biggest cruising state in the entire world. Not to say other states, but please remember, we have Port Canaveral with 4.5 million passengers and Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale with 3.8. And there were 10 other ports. So that is basically what we're looking at in 2022, but I think it's been delayed. The Titanic, the boat I was talking to you about, will start cruising. So here's the question. Would you buy a ticket on that boat, Carol?
On the Titanic? Well, you know, I'm superstitious, so I might think twice about it.
All right. So the second time you would do it.
I didn't say the second time. I said I would think twice.
I'm just telling you what I heard her say. What can I tell you? So cruising is such a high demand after 2020 and 2021 that this is interesting. They're not building anything else up in the Catskills. Viking Cruise Lines is going to be constructing 11 ships. 11 ships. Royal Caribbean, 6 more. And over the next 7 years, MSC Cruises is adding 11 new ships at a total cost of $10 billion.
And I'm sure that once the COVID is over, people will be restless to get back to cruising.
Yes.
So maybe they will recover their money, and there'll be a lot of different things going on post-COVID with the ship.
But I do want to tell you something in case you've been wondering. And you might want to write this down because maybe one day you might think about taking this type of a cruise.
Okay.
It is very, very unique. Okay. And please listen very carefully. Though most cruise lines do not permit topless sunbathing, I am compelled to let you know that there is one that does. Just to let you know, if you want to get a pencil and paper and write down the name, by all means, please do so. There are a few European ships, such as Hapag-Lloyd's, Hapag Lloyd's, the Europa, and that offers designated decks to do so. And they say, think of it as a nude beach in the middle of the ocean. So if you are so inclined, by all means, after the pandemic is over, please go ahead and make your reservations. Should I call up and make one?
You do whatever you want.
Will you join me?
I will.
Okay. These lectures in 2022 might be interrupted by a cruise. And by the way, I do have a question for you. When that cruise is over and I've taken pictures, do you want me to put them and send them to you?
Up to them.
Just asking out loud. All right. So I took you to a journey which we hope you enjoyed. And that journey, again, covered the relationship between the Borcht Belt and cruising. And I think a lot of it is similar. And of course, there are a little bit of differences because when you cruise, you get to visit other places. And I want to go back for a moment. You went to visit before the pandemic, some of your friends up in New York, and you went to a hotel up in the Catskills. What hotel was it?
What?
What hotel was it?
I don't remember.
I think it was a rebuilt of the Concorde, if I remember correctly.
No, it was
Anyway, how was the experience?
The experience was okay.
Was it like the old days?
No, it wasn't.
No.
Nope.
So here's a question. Do you want to go back to the old days?
Why can't you have both?
Why can't you have both? So cruising is on its way.
I mean, remember, there should be something for everyone. Some people who don't want to be on a ship, who don't want to cruise, but want a pleasant vacation experience could go someplace like the Catskills. And people who like to be on a ship and want to get off and go visit ports could do that. So why can't we have everything?
You're right. So I wanted to give you this preview. Ships are beautiful today. I know for many of us, well, cruising is no longer an option. But when you see these things on TV, I want you to remind yourselves at least of the great times. And I know many of us were there. The great times of the Borscht Belt, the wonderful comedians, the wonderful times, the great food. And I want to end by saying what Roy Rogers used to say. Remember what Roy Rogers, was it Roy Rogers or Gene Autry?
I don't know. Depends on what you're going to say, and I probably won't know either one
I don't
of
think it
them.
was neither now that I think about it. So there was a song, Happy Days. Anyway, happy sailings to everybody. Enjoy life, sail through life, enjoy it all, keep smiling. But whatever you do, please don't eat as much as we used to when we cruised and when we went up to the Catskills. My name is Andy Greenberg, and with me is
I'm Carol, and
happy sailing.
happy sailing to you.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye.